Welcome back to another episode of Work, Life, Play. Today, my friend, I'm going to call her because she sat on my shelf for so many years. Her work has found a way to live underneath my skin. Sunni Brown is just a delightful, lovely human. What she's really opened up for me is this idea of, as a communicator, as a storyteller, to learn to expand my language of literacy to include visuals. I'm a closet doodler. I wouldn't even have called it that years ago. I just thought I had difficulty paying attention when when things would drift in my mind. So I would find myself very often taking notes in just a scratch pad. I prefer journals with no lines, just blank white pages. Quote I love is, "Be who you are and go the whole way." So in my process of being who I was and trying to go the whole way and incrementally taking steps forward in that, I was dragging around a marker bag. You've probably heard some of you have heard this before. And I was dragging this marker bag to business meetings, corporate executive stuff, boardroom stuff. And I would roll out my sketch pad, and then I'd pull out my markers, and then everyone around me was with their, at the time, like IBM ThinkPads, and in a PC world. And I remember one guy gave me crap about it later, and he was like, "Man, dude, what was the deal with the kindergarten bag of markers you're dragging around?" And I said, "You know what? Yeah, thanks for that. I'm exercising my weird. I'm just going with it. I'm just going to see where it goes." Well, around the same time, I discovered Sunni's work. And this, I would say, like this normalization and science-based, like, oh, by the way, Steve Jobs and President Kennedy were doodlers. And she kind of went on, like Thomas Edison was a doodler. And she kind of had all this like cool, like, "What? You mean I'm like them?" And she went on to say, this is what it looks like when you actually can develop your skill set to articulate ideas visually. There's a lot that happens in your brain. And then as that continues, then how we then share and tell stories, that some people are very visual, some people are very literal, some people are very abstract. And by being a communicator with developing the skill set of visual literacy, we can expand our ability to maximize the influence that we have in whatever arenas that we're operating in. So I've become a big fan. And in her books, she's very how-to. So it's very accessible in how do you become a person who can communicate visually as well. So that isn't to say that any one of us are going to win like an art contest. That isn't the goal. The goal is you can actually draw a dog pretty quickly and people know what it is. And it's especially in the business world where we're just bludgeoned by slides and decks and computer projection. It becomes really fun to become the kind of person who can communicate beyond just what a computer allows for. So all that as background, my favorite part about the conversation with Sunni and I is that it was years in the making. We had a attempt at connecting while she lived in Denver. And I had our VW bus, and we were going to come by, do the interview in the bus, and do all kinds of fun stuff there. And we've now had to pivot years later and communicate over Zoom, which is a great way for today. But we're still holding out hope that we'll be in the bus one day together, and we can have another riff. What you'll notice about the conversation today is it's just super social and just life on life. And we're just exchanging ideas as two creators, as two passionate humans in the work that we do in the world. So it's less of a interview format of tell me about your new book and more about let's just talk about the work that you do, the person that you are, and how you've become that person. Friends, welcome aboard. Glad you're here with us. This is good for you. Keep going. You can do this. I think your publisher had sent me a copy of the Doodle Revolution.
Oh, amazing.
I've been in corporate consulting and software and like enterprise business And everybody carries around an IBM ThinkPad,
Right, of course.
Maybe a Mac these days. Back then, I just started secretly dragging these markers around.
Amazing.
I would just start like pulling out a pad. I was called like exercising my weird. I got made fun of, poked fun at, in these corporate settings, right? And then I found out it was like a cool superpower. So
yeah,
all that.
I'm glad you found that out.
And I attribute lots of it to you.
Oh, thank you. That is what makes it worthwhile, because you never know who's going to find your message.
Well, fast forward today, and I work for McKinsey.
Oh, yeah.
And standard issue is a bag of markers. So now I carry around my markers, and we all have Mr. Sketch brand.
That is the craziest thing I've heard in a while. Because McKinsey is like an epic company. It's been around forever and has very traditional culture, business culture. That's incredible.
So now in my community of practice, every one of us drags around a bag of markers. Phrasing you taught me was visual literacy. And actually beginning to look at if we can win the limbic brain, then we can say so much quicker, easier. And then the distinction of how to stand out and how to communicate in an effective way. One question I've been curious about for you for years is the 100 most creative people in business. And I have two questions. The first part is, why did they say that about you?
I think it was a little bit like you carrying your markers around in an environment that was hostile to that. Perhaps it had something to do with a person who completely, in total seriousness, advocated doodling. Like I was dead serious about it, and I still am. And I think that probably got their attention.
That's very true. Well, what I found liberating about your advocating for doodling was, I think you noted specifically Steve Jobs. And there was a couple other handful of like influence,
like kind of epic people. Yeah, Richard Feynman and Einstein, and it's like a secret skill.
Yeah,
that is required.
So cool. It was like what is it? Like a normalization of something that was formerly shame, and then the decoupling of wasting time and not paying attention is like a debunked myth.
Yes, there was so much bullshit around doodling. And it was just thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you liked it.
Oh, it was amazing. So again, like the number of times I've professed your gospel, I'm saying like, no, listen, here's some stats and show you why I'm not goofing off.
Yeah, like exactly.
Yeah, I'm actually embedding this into my brain, understanding and process.
Yeah.
Which, again, was very liberating, so that didn't have to be like something that in the corporate world I'm secretly ashamed of.
Yeah, well, of course. And I think that a lot of people face that criticism. And that was the other aspect of it, was to your point, which was that I was like, if anybody wants to challenge me on this, I will challenge you back, because the science shows it, the data, the research, the like anecdotal evidence, it felt like it was the doodle's time, And I just happened to be that person. I don't think there was anything special about me. I think I just intersected a time and place and an idea, and was willing to share the idea.
What big ideas then are you intersecting and stewarding today?
You know how people always say that ideas are eternal, meaning that there's not any new ones? And there's just times and places when we find them, and then we kind of carry the flag. So I think the idea that I'm obsessed with now is like what I call inner science, but it's not a new idea. It's a very, 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 very old idea. It's like thousands of years old. And what it means is just sort of self-awareness and removing self-deception and sort of self-bias, and getting interested in what are the beliefs and motivations that are actually driving our behavior. We need to know ourselves, and we need to understand why we do stuff, and have no hidden agendas around our behavior, and like be liberated from some of the unexamined beliefs. Like, there's this great quote from Carl Jung that I put in the memoir, actually, on one of the sections. It's so good. Listen to this. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful?
Boom. Wow. So that's what I'm working on, is just creating opportunities. I'm still integrating visual thinking and gaming and design thinking and all that. But I want to create opportunities for people to start to like kind of free themselves from themselves.
And for you then, Sunni, how have you freed yourself as you've known yourself?
Hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been a Zen student. So my path onto that personal liberation path there was some methodologies that I got really schooled in. And one of them is I've been a Zen student for 13 years now. So like a pretty hardcore practitioner. And also a method called internal family systems, which is a really beautiful, powerful method of like understanding aspects of yourself and then kind of updating them. And then also identifying limiting beliefs and stories that need to be dissolved so that you can step into something. And I've been trained in that to the hilt. And I have been started to gamify it as well in public and at keynotes and stuff. And like just an extraordinary amount of research and writing about this topic. I know the 10,000 hours things has been kind of debunked on some level, but I've definitely put in my 10,000 hours around that kind of stuff.
One of the things that I noticed, and I see this a lot with humans, whether at work or elsewhere, is that I was just scared to death, petrified that if I actually allowed myself to slow down to feel the pain, that it would be like the point of no return. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I'll come back from this.
That's right.
There's too much. And so I would attempt to like, in snack sizes, maybe like retreats and, spiritual work and different things like I'll process or like counseling or whatever it was. But I didn't know I knew, but I now know I knew there was a tsunami and I didn't have time or space or know what the hell to do with it. So to your point, what I love about what you're saying is, that there's actually a way.
Oh, yeah.
There is a way forward.
And I'm so glad for that because there's something very soothing about the antiquity of the path and the heroic journey and all that. Because it's like our ancestors have done this and there's things you can trust as you step in. And there's not just one way, there's multiple ways, but it's all home. It's like going back home to your center and to yourself. And it's a practice forever. It's not like you're done. I don't even know if I would like that.
I wouldn't like it. No.
It sounds right.
Yeah, I like it. I appreciate the upside of the benefits of seeing you in more freedom and joy. I continue to choose the transformational process.
Yeah, wow, that's huge though. But so when you work at McKinsey, does that do you find yourself bringing that out of people? Like, do people know this about you there?
So not only do I carry markers, but we are facilitators of transformation in the leadership context.
Oh, right on.
The work I do every day is with humans. So it's the inner work. So what we're talking through is some of the framing or the buzzwords or terms just have a soft edge to them in the corporate space.
Like what are some words that they would use?
So we use hero's journey for sure into the
cool.
The transformation journey is that an inner journey. In order to lead others, you have to learn to lead self first.
Oh, good.
In order to move forward, you often have to let go of the thing that's not serving you, and you don't know it's not serving you until you're at a place of an upset where you're over efforting. It's not a lack of energy you're expending. It is that the return on that investment isn't what you know is possible. Right.
You're not in flow.
Yeah, you're not in flow. So when you find yourself out in flow and you're in a reactive state, what might be possible if you held some different beliefs? And what are some of the beliefs that are limiting beliefs? So it's the same, as you said, like ancient.
Yeah, but it's good that it's become part of the culture.
Kind of like doodling. There may be long held beliefs about why something can't work here. Yeah. In the corporate space.
I'm sure.
And this, I think, is also one that's making massive leaps and bounds forward as leaders and executives find themselves just like in this COVID environment of like, totally can't solve, this is not solvable, but just by thinking alone, or literally you have to learn to lead a new way. And by employing all of our faculties and resources, mind, body, spirit, intellect, then we have a much better chance of being able to step into a future that we've not yet experienced and don't recognize. So it's super rad. Like,
that's amazing.
And then the upside of it isn't just for navel gazing, actually, so you can get more shit done in the right way.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing, is there's so much energy released when you unburden from some shitty beliefs.
Totally.
Like, that's what's so crazy. And that's actually part of why it's worth it.
Yes.
Because there is a reward for going through the fire. Like, and some of that has to do with alignment with your actual, what you're sort of here to do.
Yes.
And then other parts of it is just, you're not battling with yourself. So you have energy, you know, and vitality and stuff like that. But you don't know that until you try it, and then you get a little bit of reward, and then you can step in further. You know, that expression, constitutionally incapable, it's about people that are a kind of a fixed mindset and an unreceptivity to new information. And to me, the consequences of that mindset are so serious and so significant that I've always been fascinated by people that I don't know that many people that have that mindset, because of course I'm an improv facilitator and a game facilitator, so I wouldn't attract those people. But I did come from that environment, and so I was always like, holy shit, there are so many people.
I see, but your tribe that you roll in and the people that come to you are not like that.
No, not at all. We're super adaptive and really agile, and we pivot super fast, and like we like challenges, and learning is paramount. And so I don't know if that was derived from situations where there was a rigidity and like a cognitive rigidity.
Yes.
But it is absolutely staggering to me when people are not interested in learning and absorbing new information. I find that absolutely staggering, because the consequences are enormous and they're not good.
Yeah. So tell me about, if that was your upbringing, that was the narrative that you lived in the beginning. What was that about?
I think a lot of it was like hyper religiosity, you know, like, I mean, you can be a religious person and have a contemplative practice and be very flexible and open. They're not, you know, mutually exclusive, but that was not this environment I was in. It was like very binary. Everything was very black and white. It's like either this or that.
Yes.
But then but that's just one layer. And then if you add the other layer, which is like legacy, mental illness. And I don't know if you read this book, Educated. It's a memoir. I had it for like 6 months, but I didn't want to read it because I knew it would be too close to home and I wasn't really ready to read it.
Sure.
But I finally have started reading it, and there's some serious similarities. She grows up on a mountain in Idaho with Mormon survivalists, and they're so hardcore about their belief systems. And so when you find those belief systems that are non-adaptive, and then you are confronted with life as it is, like other things that sort of confront those ideas, it's very disruptive for the person involved in that struggle. And so some of it has to do with just my inquisitive mind and me trying to carry ideas that were just incoherent. You know, it's like you can't form a coherent narrative because it's like magical thinking. And I'm like, I'm kind of a scientist, so I can't do magical thinking. So it was a complete, I think, on almost every level, it was a disaster for me to come from this environment. It's just not, I mean, it's not how I would design an environment at all.
What you just said is, I can't do magical thinking because I'm a scientist. So tell me more about it. Are you saying that about yourself?
I mean, I'm an armchair scientist. Like, I love research. And it's so fascinating because as a facilitator, you might enjoy this. There's a model of the world called spiral dynamics.
Yes, I'm familiar.
And it's oh, cool. So, you know, like in the early stages of sort of human development, there is superstition, and there's a lot of mythical and magical thinking. And like volcano, like if you appease a volcano by throwing a virgin in, you'll save the village, like that kind of thinking.
Yes.
So humans are inherently capable of that kind of thinking, and we enjoy it, and we need it to survive. You know, like when things feel out of control, you want to just say like, oh, I'll just pray to Odin and somehow that will help. So there's nothing problematic inherently about just having a lucky charm or whatever. But when it crosses over into an ideology that's like pure dogma and flies in the face of just logic or the evidence is in, and it's very clear that you can't use a magnet to diagnose a heart condition. Like things that are super
The world
fucking-
is not flat, you mean?
Yeah, like that. And so no, I'm not a magical thinker. That said, I was thinking last night about how all of us have things that we perceive to be effective that are, in fact, there's no data for them. Like, and that's fine. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
That said, when confronted with scientific evidence, it just is useful to just not believe in that anymore unless you find a personal direct experience that is for you is just legit.
Yes.
And you need it to carry on. So I'm just more, I'm very cautious about not believing in like fairies unless that has been deeply and totally true for me, and I don't need verification from other people, you know.
But in the beginning, your origin was the antithesis of that.
Totally.
No scientific proof of any kind necessary.
Everything was a miracle. Like everything was a mystery. Everything had, I mean, I was actually, because I'm in process of writing the memoir, so I have been remembering a lot of things. So I started remembering things that my mom used to say that, like she used to say that there were, you know, like if technology broke down, it was because it was like demonic.
Yeah.
And so I've started remembering that stuff, like, holy shit, because I think in her life, the world was that way. Like it was angelic and demonic, and there wasn't, and you couldn't find an answer that was concrete. Yes. And so, so I remember when I was in church, because I grew up in church, and I remember when I was 15, 16, 17, I was like, I can't say these things and feel true to myself, you know? So that was just the beginning of a very long journey of unraveling all kinds of crazy shit.
As you're doing that, I'm just curious, Sunni, for you, as you sit down to write a memoir, I imagine that the more you pull those strings, how do you regulate that then? How do you decide now is, or maybe this is, I'm revealing more about how I try to manage my pain.
Yeah, you might need to write a memoir, dude.
Yeah, I can go in right now, and then I need to then come back. How do you manage those re-entry points?
Right. No, it's a great question. It's really important because I think people do need to take care of themselves when entering into those spaces of intense emotional content. Mm-hmm. And luckily, that's what my Zen practice does, is it's like super stabilizing. And when you the central practice of Zen is what's called Zazen, which is just seated objectless meditation. So you just watch your mind go. Like it's not some effortful experience. You just sit still and watch the storms go, and you feel the feelings of the storms, but because you're stable and stabilized, you don't drown in them. So you're very present to them and you feel them very keenly. And I've cried in meditation for hundreds of hours. Yes. 100%. Yes. And because I'm doing it in a container, so it's a contained environment, meaning like I'm not drinking and I'm not, punching walls and I'm sitting and being with, and it's like it's a slow process. I mean, I've been a meditator for a very long time. So, but in the early stages of my kind of recovery, that was central to being okay with very intense emotional content. Because and also in terms of people just sort of sorting through emotional information, there's like compartmentalizing and denying, which is pretty not uncommon I did that too. Mm-hmm. And then there's like hysteria and like overwhelming dysregulation, just like blah. And that was the environment that I was in. It was like a drama after drama after drama after drama. It was constant. So for me, it was a learning process of feeling my feelings, knowing that they were intense and volatile, and not ignoring them, but just staying in the middle of that. And then over time, you get confidence about that. So I don't have to disallow my feelings because I know that I'm available for them to be stabilized. But that said, working on the memoir it's more tumultuous than even in the past. And I've had some pretty tumultuous emotional experiences, but this is a new environment. Yeah. So I'm like having to re-up on, okay, this is how we do this. Yeah, like right. You do not just go walk into these chapters like you're not in the woods and shit, like on a mountain in Colorado. You don't just, this is not like a playground.
No, this is as they say, mountains don't care.
Mm-hmm. Right. They say that.
They do.
That's so true.
one of my superpowers and one of my growth areas has been empathy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to be very empathetic and imagine what it might be like to be in your shoes. And what I've learned to regulate is to not do that with a loss of self. What I learned in my the old way of living was that my compassion led to fatigue.
Yeah.
And what I'm learning to do is to live and be empathetic,
Mm-hmm.
but also be able to put a period at the end of that and move forward.
Yeah. There's two terms that you'll like. One is emotional gating, gating, which is what you're describing, essentially like having the access to open and close the gate when you're absorbing other people's emotional energy.
Yeah.
And the other one is compassion versus empathy. So neurologically, the recent studies around compassion is that it's not fatiguing neurologically or physiologically. Empathy is fatiguing. And those are distinct. They're actually different neural networks in the brain. And it's really helpful because the other thing that's beautiful about Zen is that or Buddhism in general, the heart of it is compassion. That's actually the practice. And so unbeknownst to me, I was also training in building the muscle of holding space and compassion for myself. Yes. And for others, really important for the self too. And I was disengaging from over empathizing.
Using that language, I have learned how to offer compassion without getting lost in it, but also finding that, that in that there's a lot of strength in how to offer compassion and not lead to my fatigue.
Exactly. And it's really good that I'm so impressed with you.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. It's clear that you're, have like been through many hoops of development. Do you process some of your work, like your just internal work, by writing, or like physical exercise? Like, what do you do?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I've just found my adventurous soul finds expression in wild places, and so I try to do that in small micro minutes.
Mm-hmm.
In my corporate life, I used to have I still have it, but when I was working in an office building. Mm-hmm. I started going down for coffee breaks down to my truck and decided I would become a smoker, was what I told my friends. And
that's what you told your friends?
Yeah, I'm going to become a smoker because they get all these breaks and free time. a day. So I went down to my truck and fire up a little stove to make a brew and would make coffee on my tailgate. And, it's like stuff like that. Like, how can I learn to live adventurously in the life that I already have
nice.
I'm in versus, having those big experiences, once or twice a year.
Yeah, right.
And learning to infuse my daily life with the essence of those kinds of experiences.
That's awesome. That's so smart.
Yeah, it's great. So it's like
micro moments.
It is. Yeah, micro adventures and micro moments.
How long would you say your process has been, just your journey of integrating work, life, and play more?
Yeah. So 2011, when our daughter passed away, was, I want to say it was in and around that same time that I come up with, I think what I'm going to call this podcast and blog thing is work, life, play. And no periods, no commas, and nothing separating it. Because that's my life practice.
So good. Yeah.
I don't know how the hell to do this.
I love that.
I've just learned now, like I'm in the middle right now with some design work with a design team, and we're redoing a lot of my messaging around my brand. And where we've zeroed in is that work-life balance is a myth.
Yeah.
It's unobtainable.
Right.
Because ultimately work-life balance is this idea of a teeter-totter. You're supposedly like getting it perfect.
Yeah.
I never get it perfect.
Balance, yeah.
Balance is just crap. So I used to actually think that was attainable. And that was where I would experience a lot of frustration over that stove of mine that sat in the basement of my house for like 6 years that didn't get much use. By learning to say, what if it's about learning sustainable practices and daily rhythms and micro moments? And then I'm integrating in who I am. And that means friends, family, work, creative work, play,
Mhm.
like what if I figure out how to weave that in on an ongoing basis?
It's so good.
I think it's just been, as you said, a practice. It's a unraveling of an old way that served me really well for a really long time.
That's good to give it credit, because I think people often will be hard on themselves for, quote, not having done that already. But there's reasons why we have these systems in place, and they're to be respected for the serving time that they did, you know?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And if it wasn't for all of my over efforting and striving and
I know, right?
then I wouldn't have some of the luxuries and choices that I have today.
Right. That's true. That makes complete sense.
Super grateful for all that I did.
Yeah.
And it was time for a turn of the page, and not even a new chapter, but a new book.
In the Zen tradition, there's a lot of really beautiful stories that are profound and useful. And one of them is about this gentleman who's on a horse, and there's a war breaking out, and he wants to be a soldier. He wants nothing more than to be a soldier and defend his village. And he has a horse wreck and breaks his leg. And long story short, a series of things occur that make it less and less possible for him to become a soldier, and which is what he wants to happen, right? So then when it doesn't happen, he turns out to be like meeting his destiny in a very different way that turns out to be more satisfying, more fulfilling, more interesting, and more appropriate to who he is. But the whole time he couldn't see that, because you don't know that until the end, Yeah. So at some point you start trusting the process. And it's hard to do. It's super hard to do. And like, even when you eat, because the creative process is kind of like that. And the further in I go to the creative process, the more I respect it as like an ocean. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have my little boat out here, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got my paddles. I know what I'm doing. No idea. No idea what wants you. I'll leave you with one more term, which I love. It's called an ego death. And it's really a beautiful thing. And it's a very destructive and crazy thing for a lot of people, but it is a process of softening your identity and your construction of your identity, so that you can just be open-hearted and available for life. And I can tell very quickly if anyone has had an egoic death or not.
Yes.
By virtue of, are they still posturing, and if so, how much? Right. And it's not an insult. It's like, man, I was that lady.
Me too.
Me too. Hashtag. Exactly. But once you have that lens, you kind of know, okay, yeah. So they haven't got their ass handed to them yet, or they have, and they shut down further, which is also an option. Yes. But if it happens to you enough, you just start going, oh man, how are you? How can I help?
I love that you use "get your ass handed to you." That is one of my favorite phrases.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
me too.
Not everybody knows that.
Oh man, because it's like that's the only reason I became a semi-decent person, is I got my ass handed to me like 4 times. Like 4 big times.
So David Brooks is a New York Times columnist.
Oh yeah. And
he wrote The Road to Character.
Yes, he did.
And what he wrote is the sequel is The Second Mountain. He says in the intro, which is fascinating, he says, the reason I'm writing this book is because what I discovered in writing The Road to Character is that actually wasn't the right answer. And then he went on to say, and I'm writing this book to make sense of my life that I have not lived successfully. The framing of this book, and I think I found this helpful, is that most of us spend time ascending the first mountain. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, whether it's because it didn't work when we got there, the summit was lonelier than we thought, got blown off the mountain, whatever the reasons may be, find ourselves in a valley. Some people then choose to go back and try and climb the first mountain again, and they can try. And then others sometimes choose that a second mountain of more significance. Basically, that's the conversation we've been having. The arc is.
I love that. Really it's so great. Encouraging, because I feel like I'm at the gate of the second mountain, or like maybe I'm on base camp. I don't know, but there are many parts of me that want to turn back for sure.
You really love it, and I would suggest that his writing in this one is so much more accessible,
beautiful,
at a human level. And versus a third person looking in, on someone's life
exactly
level, it's more introspective, and like a whole chapter on love and marriage. And he mentions in the beginning, oh, by the way, and mine failed.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard.
Yeah, but it's really great, like super helpful. So I've been using that one quite a bit.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that recommendation. I'm on it because I've always loved his work. And now it's like, oh, now we get to love him as a human person.
Yes, exactly right. All right. Awesome.
Thanks for having me. I really, really appreciate it. It's super nice to meet you.